Hey, what's up, everyone? Coach Joey coming in. And I wanted to come in today with a message in reference to some of the nutritional stuff that we've been doing every week. I'm eating right now, coincidentally. But if you haven't really been following this series, first day or first week, we talked about first point or first thing you should start doing is writing down all your foods so you have like a starting point, measurable data along the way. The second thing we talked about was frequency. Meaning that you want to try to eat more frequently throughout the day and how that manipulates your metabolic rate. And then last week we talked about consistency, trying to first get to the right amount of calories that your body needs and then being able to introduce that to your body consistently week in and week out, which in turn will help level out your metabolic rate to what's going to be appropriate for you. So today we're going to dig a little bit deeper. A pretty common question that I get when we talk about nutrition and people start asking about what's referred to as macros or micros. No one really knows what the heck one or the other is. Some people may know a little bit about one or the other. So a macronutrient is something that is going to build into the calorie. And the calorie is simply just a unit of energy that your body can use. So we have three. We have fat, protein, carbohydrate. All right, whatever anybody else tells you. Now carbohydrates could be made of different things: sugar, complex carbs, whatever the case is. There's three macronutrients: carbohydrate, protein, fat. Now the flip side to it is a micronutrient. Some people get this a little bit confused and they'll be like, well, a micronutrient is sugar or saturated fat or this fat or that. Not the case. Micronutrients are usually a reference to something like vitamins and minerals and essentials outside of that caloric load. Assuming that you're doing CrossFit or that you're getting involved in nutrition, you shouldn't really be depleted or deficient in any vitamins. If you could, there's pretty easy ways to overcome that, unless you have like a genetic problem of absorption of certain vitamins or whatever the case is. You shouldn't really have too many problems with that. And if you do, you can always supplement it. But what I want to talk about today is the macro side, because realistically, that's what we're going to pay attention to when we're talking about nutrition. So remember, we talked about a fat, carbohydrate, and a protein, and trying to determine what's going to be appropriate for you and how you need to eat that. So ideally, a good rule of thumb is you typically want to stay between 0.8 and 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. You want to typically try to stay within the same realm of that when you talk about proteins, carbohydrates, so 0.8 to 1.2. Now, you could dig a little bit deeper into this, and there's formulas based off of lean body mass. Sorry, there's people walking in the gym. What's up, Blake? So you could base some of those numbers off of your lean body mass and dial it in a little bit more, but that requires getting tested, seeing what your lean body mass is, coming up with this formula. And then fat, you essentially decide in a math equation. So how many calories do you have left? Based on eating that amount of carbohydrates and that amount of protein, and that'll essentially give you a baseline of what fats you should consume in the remaining part of your diet. Now, that being said, there's no black and white to this, meaning that what works for you may essentially not work for me, and what works for the person next to me may not essentially work for you, or maybe it does. So part of and this is why there's levels to this nutrition stuff. So if you go back to part one, being disciplined enough to write down what you're doing, because as you make changes, you need to know the data and what happens to your body. It's as simple as that. So you have to have consistent data to start as a baseline, and then as you start to make changes, you can see what happens. Now, we already talked about not manipulating calories too much once you get figured out what you need to be consuming as far as calories. So how do you start to manipulate your diet after that? Well, it's not just calories in, calories out. People have learned that over time. So when you try and figure out what works well for you, you have to start to make small changes. The biggest mistake that people make is they make more than one change at a time. So if you have a baseline and you've been doing 1 gram of carbohydrate per pound of body weight, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and then the next week you bump both up to 1.2 and then 1.2, or you bump one up to 1.2 and you bump the other one down to 0.8 to see kind of what's going to happen, you've made 2 changes. So you don't know what worked exactly, all right? So you have to make sure that you only make one change at a time and ride it out for a little bit of time. But anyways, the purpose of this video is to explain what macro and micro is, which we've talked about, and to explain kind of where a baseline is. So if you're somebody who's trying to figure out, well, where do I start? I don't know how many carbohydrates I'm supposed to eat. I don't know how much fat I'm supposed to eat. I don't know how much proteins I'm supposed to eat. 0.8 to 1.2 per pound of lean, or per pound of body weight, and 0.8 to 1.2 of protein per pound of body weight. So carbohydrates and protein are going to be the same, and then fats you can make up in the difference of your calories. So it's not that difficult to figure it out. If you're eating this many amounts of carbohydrates, this many amounts of fat or protein, the fats will usually kind of fall in line if you hit those numbers and you're getting to the calories that you need to get. I don't know, like I said, I apologize, I don't know what the equation is off the top of my head. I could get that information for anybody who may want it. But like I said, remember that in order for this to work for you guys as you're figuring it out, you have to do step 1, step 2, step 3, and then this would be step 4 as you're kind of dialing it in. And for most of you, you're not going to be able to come to these conclusions all in 1 week. So this isn't designed for you to watch 1, 2, 3, 4 and then immediately make all those changes. So make one change at a time, get to where it becomes habitual for you, and then once that happens, then you can start to make additional changes. All right, you guys, I hope these nutrition videos are pretty helpful. If you guys have comments, please feel free to comment so that way I know I'll continue making them. All right, you guys, talk to you soon.